Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we find folks who have stories that will inspire you to think in different ways about how you can make a difference in the world around you. We're part of Rotary International, 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors around the world who look for ways to pool their talents and time and energy in order to make things all the better for their communities globally, locally, and digitally. Today, we're going to be talking with Josh Nichols of CrossBraining and Rick Loughery of GoPro about a project that brought them together and how this project allows us to see new possibilities for using video as part of the power of storytelling. With that, Josh, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. And so Rick and I met in a small island nation called Palau. I had never heard of it. I was an underwater robotic instructor along with another instructor. And we were asked to build underwater robots, and search for MIAs along with Project Recover, who had been looking for MIAs from Palau for about 20 years. And they needed some technology, and our students were able to build it. And so we partnered with them. I found out where Palau was, got really excited about going there with the students. And Bob Richards, who was the lead instructor, the two of us were able to raise some funds and get the students out there. And I think we were out there for about a year or two before Rick came out. And so we had been out there a couple times. And then I think it was on the third visit when we went out there is when I was able to meet Rick, and Rick was out there with I think the sole purpose of capturing the Bent Prop project, or the Bent, at the time it's called Bent Prop, but the Project Recover story. And so I was out there with our students, and we were using GoPros on our ROVs to capture images in the oceans of Palau. So there was some synergy right off the bat.
Yeah, so at that time, I was connected to Scripps Institute of Oceanography. They had been using GoPro cameras on their underwater drones, and they also have a headquarters, if you will, in Palau. And so it's a small island, and they were mapping coral reefs with, like, they look like torpedoes, but they're underwater drones. And they were introduced to the folks over the Bent Prop project. And they started helping them because they already had these drones mapping underwater reefs. And so they could detect what was natural and what was man-made. And when they would like what they call move the grid. And when they found something that was man-made, they could triangulate it with the GoPro cameras that they had on these underwater drones. And they could look at the footage and see, yes, that is something man-made. Yes, that might be a piece of a plane. And then they would coordinate with Bent Prop, who then would go dive on it. And so they had this kind of working group together. And so I knew this guy, Dr. Eric Terrell, who heads up Scripps Institute of Oceanography. And he's like, oh, you should connect with these guys. They bring this high school program down, they're related to that. And they're doing some cool stuff with their own underwater drones. And Bob Richardson, he reached out and explained, like, hey, we use your cameras. We do this trip. With the third year, we're doing this trip. It would be, we're looking for sponsorship and anything you could help. And so we not only set them up with cameras, but we provided, a modest amount of cash sponsorship that helped cover the cost of some of their boats and stuff that they rented down there, because the kids would do their own dives and with their own underwater drones that had GoPro cameras on them. And it was a really cool setup. And this was like, what, 9 years ago? So like some of the stuff they were doing, it was pretty impressive. And so I went down to Palau, and then Josh and I met down there. Cause he was obviously down there, and we were there, like Josh said, we were there because the bent prop story was a very cool story and what they were doing. So we actually, it was one of our first kind of mini documentaries that we did, shot 100% on GoPro. It's up on our YouTube channel. We can share the link to that video. It's still one of our best performing long form YouTube. Yeah, there it is. Long form stories. So we were down doing that. The other thing, just to make it more complicated, is at the time, 60 Minutes was interested in GoPro, and 60 Minutes did this big feature on GoPro, and Anderson Cooper was the reporter. And one of the things that I told him about was like, hey, there's other companies, other organizations using GoPro cameras outside of action sports. Let me tell you about Scripps Institute of Oceanography and this bent prop stuff. 60 Minutes did a story on us. Anderson Cooper did that story, but Anderson was so intrigued, as we were too, about what bent prop was doing down there. So they were also down at the same. Anderson Cooper came down, 60 Minutes came down, did a story on bent prop as well. So all these things were happening at the same time when Josh and I were down there 9-some years ago.
And Rick, just I have the screen up. The simplest way to watch this video is to really, I think, on YouTube, just type in GoPro, Palau, and bent prop. I think because it was called bent prop at the time, it's now called Project Recover, which was founded by Pat Scannon and is now being run by Derek Abbey. And so one of my main jobs out there, I'm going to go to this next screen, is when I was out there. So that's a picture of some of the high school students, and that's the ROV that the high school students built. And one of my main reasons of going out there was to teach Palauans across multiple different islands how to build these ROVs. And so I wouldn't call myself a subject matter expert in underwater robotics, but I would say that I know how to teach it. I know how to help younger kids build these ROVs. And so I was jumping around each day after some of these missions and going out to schools and teaching them how to build these so that they could search the waters themselves. And that's when Rick said, I think, Rick, you said, what are you doing each day when you jump off the boat? And so Rick joined me in with a classroom, and because we were putting the GoPros on these vehicles as well. And as a teacher, one of the things I was toiling in the back of my mind was, how do you spread a subject matter expert around? How do you get students to tell stories of their learning? And one of my ideas was I wonder if I could build some software to do this, to make it very simple for transfer of knowledge and to break the barriers that prevent people from learning, giving equity to subject matter experts. So I started building out the software, and Rick was intrigued by that as well. And so Rick and I became friends, and I asked him if he could give me some mentorship on it. And Rick, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about like your early days with GoPro, some of the stories you shared with me, so that it built confidence in me to do this.
Yeah, I said I'd help him find a mentor. But so, and like, I was super impressed with what Josh, because at the time, Josh was a full-time teacher, but he had started building out the early days of CrossBraining was around like, how do you use video to teach and learn, not only teach, but to show that you understand the subject matter. And he was using GoPro cameras to do that. And he had already been doing that. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So then we connected, like you said, and in the early days before, like he had the idea for the software and the software was coming along. But even before then, he was going into classrooms and showing classrooms how with a few GoPro cameras and some cool lesson plans that you can show these kids new ways to learn things in STEM, and also to have them demonstrate through video how they understand the subject matter. And we early on, I remember we did the one of the big educational trade shows, ISTE, right? It was ISTE, and ISTE is a big trade show for educators who come to understand the new technologies that are there. You have Google is there, Microsoft's there. And they've got big giant booths. And we had this small little booth, and I said, hey, you know what? We'll partner with you. We'll help cover the cost of it. You know, we'll come up and help you set up the booth. And by we, I meant me. And that was in Denver. And, you know, I remember early on setting this stuff up, and I know Josh was intimidated because you literally, if you would have turned around from that picture, you'd see these massive Google booths, these massive Microsoft booths, all this stuff courting these teachers. And I, you know, say, hey, we brought cameras. We're going to give away cameras. We'll throw the logo up. People are going to be like, what's GoPro doing here? So it was a good way, like, because at that time our brand was, you know, on the rise. People were like intrigued by GoPro. So what's GoPro doing at this type of conference? And I would be like, our cameras are used by this guy at CrossBraining. He's going to tell you what to do. They were all teachers, so they spoke the same language. And then what I was able to kind of share with Josh is like the little bit of the guerrilla marketing tactics. Like, okay, now at the trade shows we used to do, we'd roll up a keg of beer and we do a giveaway. Couldn't roll up the keg of beer at ISTE, but we still could do the giveaway. And we would tell everyone, hey, come back. We're giving away 5 GoPro cameras to the loudest people. So you had all these people shouting, like at 3 o'clock, all the people from the Microsoft booth, the Amazon booth, they all started going, what's going on over there? So they'd come to this little teeny booth. And these were just some of the little things that I told Josh, like, you know, like, hey, don't worry about it. Like, this is what you've got to do. This is what Nick from GoPro did back in the early days. Like, he'd have a small little table and he would shout out, like, get the whole crowd shouting out, GoPro, GoPro, GoPro. And then he'd throw a camera out, and like, the louder they shouted, the more cameras he would throw out. So just little things like that on the early days was like, you know, it was kind of like, just don't be afraid, have fun with it, and have fun with the guerrilla marketing tactics. Because when you're a small company, like, you kind of can't fail at these little tactical things. You know, they're all going to be learning, and nothing's going to make or break you, but you've got more to gain by trying some of this stuff.
And what I'll add to that, and I'm going to share the screen again, at the time, we really didn't have a working product or a working software. So it gave us an opportunity to actually validate, like, would people buy this software if we built it? So it was a great opportunity to test the market. And so really what our software does is it's sort of like the Udemy or Masterclass type of software, but for like the skilled trades. Whereas Udemy and Masterclass is one directional, it's just the person teaching you. We have the subject matter expert teach, but then our software, again, using GoPros or iPhones or, you know, any device, having the learner teach it back through video. And so, because with the skilled trades and with robotics and things like that, multiple choice tests don't cut it. They don't show you that a person's competent. And so the video and a person being able to show the skill set, but also the knowledge base through articulating their understanding, a subject matter expert asynchronously can be able to identify, is this person competent? And so because of those hundreds, if not possibly 1,000 people coming through the booth, through those giveaways, we were able to sort of walk them through this idea, and we got a lot of traction in that space. And so then we were able to go back and say, okay, we're going to build this software.
All right. Well, wonderful. I am excited to jump into this topic a bit. First of all, let me introduce. We also have on the recording Elton from Palo Alto. Good to have you with us, sir. Thank you for joining in. And for everyone watching this recording as a part of our weekly meeting, the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley can be found, as you know, at rotary.cool, in addition to SiliconValleyRotary.com. And we're always into how do these ideas, how do these stories serve the business of service? So I want to start with the psychology of video. So there are several pieces to this that are really fascinating to me. First of all, Josh, with CrossBraining, you've built this software so that it removes a lot of the headaches of creating video. So, it in terms of how narration works, how bringing different clips together works. I mean, that's all within the system. Do you find that simplifying the process gets people who were, this is my hope, I guess, that I would hope that people who are already positive about video, but are kind of worried about what it means to have to like learn different things, are able to step across that line and say, okay, yeah, we can incorporate this into what we do based on these things that you've figured out that allow us to kind of get there without having to, I don't know, earn a master's degree along the way.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned early on, I've been using video as an instructor in my class for over 15 years. And through that experience, I found out that if you say to somebody, hey, go make a video showing that you can build this frame for a robot, sometimes you'd get a 10-minute video, sometimes you'd get a 5-minute video, sometimes you would get a lot of air, like a lot of time wasted. And so the very first thing that I wanted to address, because I hadn't seen it in any other software, and we actually ended up getting a patent on the process, was chunking out the instruction just like an instructor should do. So when you chunk it out and the student knows exactly what to do, you're going to have a higher success rate from the student. And so, like, I'll share my screen again real quick. The way that we're different in this is that we give the student or the learner basically a paint by number way of they know exactly what to capture. This is a welder who's being taught how to do rod casting and the importance of rod casting. And so the instructor or the person that built out the steps said, I just need to see these 4 steps. I want you to capture it. And once you capture it, we actually take out the audio, because one of the things that we've all have grown up with is that video and audio are always recorded simultaneously. And that forces a learner to basically narrate off the cuff. And so what we did is gave them a second. So in this stage, they would go capture the video. But in this one, we're giving them some indicators of the correct terminology to use, but also giving them a place to be able to type it out. So it's like a multimodal approach. And it also gives them an opportunity to, like, when we watch users use our software, they're their worst critic, the learner is. And so they'll sit there and re-record themselves 10, 15 times, catch all their mistakes. So by the time it's done, what ends up happening is all these mini videos turn into a final video where we basically splice it all together, and now the instructor asynchronously with their student can start talking back and forth about what went well and what didn't go well. And instead of reshooting a whole video, if you did it wrong, they can go into a step and just fix the step. So I believe it's more of a coaching and facilitating type of platform to get this student to competency.
That makes sense. When I think about service clubs and video, I feel like we're looking at the same kinds of barriers that you often see in an educational setting. So lots and lots of Rotary clubs around the world, 36,000. The need for them to tell the stories of the service they do in their communities is huge in terms of helping attract support to what they do, helping people understand who they are, things like this. And yet, even with the kinds of easy tools that are out there, I'm thinking Adobe Express or Screencastify or whatever it might be, people don't know, right? And so is there an angle in the work you do that means that, like, a non-training, non-educational user might say, hey, this is actually a good tool for us to be able to build out as a team something that we think is important?
I think, the answer is yes. The instructor or the person that's building out the lesson, we'll call it, is strategically putting up guardrails that force the end user to get and capture the correct thing. And then the second piece that I'll throw out there is, because I was an instructor for over 20 years and using all different types of software, one of our goals when we were going through the testing of it is, can a first and second grader use our software? And so we started testing it with first and second graders because we were trying to break that barrier. And so one of the things that I'm very happy about with our team and the people that we've been able to collaborate with is we built a product that we can introduce to anyone from a third grader to, we call it K to Gray. Anyone in that space can learn how to use the software with about 30 minutes and actually start implementing these. We've seen nursing instructors, welding instructors, clinical educators. We work with healthcare systems where they're trained on day one and they can actually start assigning day two.
Yeah, I think the big thing with CrossBraining is like anywhere you need to have a two-way discussion with regards to learning. Like if it's just broadcasting out, that's one thing. But if it's you need to see what the student and that student, whether they're a welder or that student is a second grader, you need them to demonstrate back to you that they learned through video. That's where CrossBraining really shines and differentiates itself versus just watching something on YouTube.
Excellent.
And
sorry, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, no, and Pat Scannon, who was the founder of Project Recover, is also a medical doctor and had started the company Zoma in Berkeley, California. One of the things that I started talking with him about is, in his profession, it's see one, do one, teach one. And so it's that same idea of like, yes, we can give tests, we can give multiple choice tests, we can give essays, but there's a segment of the population where really demonstrating is the most important part. And so that's what we're trying to capture, is that there are video platforms for passive learning. There are some platforms that just, here's my story, but this avenue, I think, gives the instructor and the student the ability to capture the story and to make it more crisp by fixing some of the pieces of the story that's in that storyboard if they're making mistakes.
Makes sense. Elton, why don't you unmute and ask your question, and please mention your club as well.
Yes, I'm with the Palo Alto University Rotary Club, right at the gates of Stanford University. I wanted to ask Josh, exciting stuff that you've done, and it sounds like an exciting road you took to get there. I guess I wanted to ask two questions. One question is, today, what are some of the uses that people are putting the tool towards? We've heard about welding, we've heard about underwater vehicles. And then maybe before that, going back to the picture you showed of the children working, was it on an underwater vehicle?
Yes.
What year was that? Were they middle schoolers? And can you give one? I mean, I never think of school children as working on underwater vehicles. I think of them, doing robotics competitions, but I think of the underwater stuff as being the purview of oil companies and people with tons of big bucks.
Okay, yeah. So I'll start with the age. The age group that we were working with the Palauans were anywhere from third grade all the way up to junior college. Because the first time you build a underwater robot, it doesn't matter what age you are, right? You start with the very first underwater robot, and you advance through that. So we were able to work with all different age levels there. The second part, the other one of your questions is who do we work with? We work with railroad industry, we work with K-12, we work with nursing instructors, we work with hospital systems, we work with one of the welding one that I showed you. There's a significant need for welders in the Pacific Northwest, and there's not enough welding instructors. And so one of our welding instructors actually uses the platform first to train other welders how to become welding instructors. And then those welding instructors can use his lessons to teach the welders. So it's a great way to help with the shortage of welding. Same thing with nursing instructors. There's 80,000 qualified college students who are trying to get into nursing programs, but they're sometimes denied because there's not enough nursing instructors. And so the bottleneck sometimes is finding the subject matter expert and scaling them using video. And prior to the pandemic, this was sort of like a weird, we were doing this prior to the pandemic, but because of the pandemic and the use of video, even what we're doing right now, it's sort of, people are like, oh, aha, I get it. I get what you guys are doing now, because, video is a very great tool for this. And then just to go back one more, back to the 3rd and 4th graders, and in a shout out and a thanks to GoPro, like Rick said, they were sponsoring our boats. Some of these 3rd graders, we were building these robots. Some of these 3rd graders had never been out on the ocean, and they live in an ocean. They had never been on a boat out in the ocean, especially the type of boats that GoPro was able to give us. And so Rick and I and a lot of the kids would get out on the boats, and we'd actually go search wrecks. So there's 3rd graders searching wrecks with the robots they build.
Wow.
I was right. Fantastic. I'd like to actually build on that for a minute with a question for Rick. Rick, when one thinks of GoPro video, we tend to think of these how to put it, stunningly cool thing, like somebody flying, down a mountain on skis, and the images that they're capturing are the kind of thing that make you go, what? And it's exciting stuff. But I have seen that video about the Bent Prop project, which has so many good drone shots and underwater shots and things like this. So in addition to just a very moving story, it's a beautifully shot video. Do you find that GoPro is looking for stories like that, or constantly focusing on stories like that, so that it's not simply that there are technical advantages to using tools like the tools you've created in the cameras, but to really associate the experience of using cameras like that with really powerful stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the GoPro camera does a really good job of is immersing you into the experience and providing that POV. So I think, are we focused on that type of long form story? Not as much as we want to be, but are there people out there creating their own kind of, stories, documentaries, what have you, using GoPro cameras? Absolutely. And what they are doing is they're using the camera to provide different angles, different perspectives that you can't get with a long lens camera. And even now, like, people are shooting a ton with iPhone, right? But you're not going to get the same shot or put that iPhone or that DSLR into a situation where you can put a GoPro. And whether it's a harmful situation or just the unique perspective that you can get with a GoPro, and those perspectives lend itself well to telling the story. And that video that you saw, Searching for Heroes, the GoPro Palau, that is a great example of like those types of perspectives, those types of angles really bring you into that story more.
Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
No, I'd like to just piggyback on that. When we talk with customers and they talk about some of the environments that they're in, the oil and gas industry can be in some really, really bad environments. The first thing that they'll actually tell us, oh, we'll just use a GoPro for that. Because they also understand that they're not using an iPhone to do that or a smartphone to do that. And so nursing instruction, same thing, they'll put it on a clamp and they'll say, we're going to put this over here and set it up at this angle and put it into that environment. So I completely agree with Rick. Almost, I would say at least half of our clients bring up the name GoPro when we show them what we're doing with our software, because they need something that can be in that environment.
As one who works with teachers and school leaders, I've seen a lot of interesting uses of video, but one that has never kind of left my memory is a British Columbian educator who strapped a GoPro to a kindergartner at recess. And you see this video of a kid kind of running out and, getting to a puddle and jumping up and down and then going and then interacting with some friends. And it's a view on a time of life that you don't tend be able to really imagine, right? Because, you know, you were younger, but you've had all of these experiences since. And then as an adult, to watch something from the perspective of a 4 or 5-year-old was very impactful.
Yeah, one of like two of my favorite videos that of my own personal GoPro videos have been with my kids, where one was my one son, you know, he was 7 maybe, skiing. And, you know, it's on him skiing, and that's great. The skiing footage is fine, but it's the audio and him singing to himself his soundtrack. Like he's and he's and like we would have never, you didn't hear that. And we were dying. And that's like, that is awesome. And he's got that forever. And then same thing with my other son. It was kind of like when he was first learning how to surf and actually getting like good at it. And he caught this wave, and it was this long wave. I'm super far away from him, so I don't know what's happening, what's going on. But like when I watched the video, it was his reaction after getting off the board and talking to the camera. And he's like, that was awesome. I nailed that. And like, he's talking, and like, I would, that moment's gone. You know, I'm 200 yards away. I don't hear him saying that. So it's like those things are priceless.
Yeah. So in a minute, Josh, I want to hand it back to you for a final word, but let me handle some logistics before we do. And Rick, kudos for supporting the work of an entrepreneurial educator like Josh in building something that has a lot of educational power to it. I'm really excited about what I've learned about CrossBraining and excited to see what happens with it next. For all of you who have been watching this recording, thank you for joining us. Our guess is you've joined us in one of two places, either at the website for the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, which you can find at rotary.cool, really. And by scrolling a little farther down the page, you will see several things. First of all, you'll see some links you can follow if you wish. We'll make sure that the link to the Searching for Heroes video is available to you there as well. But let us know you were here. There's a little attendance thing that allows you to get an automated email that you can pass along to your club secretary if you're making up a miss. And then a little farther down is our discuss forum, DISQUS, and you can leave your thoughts on this program or any element of the meeting and respond to the others who have left comments there as well. It's one way that in an online and asynchronous service club, we share ideas. The other place you might have found us is on our YouTube channel. And if you take a look at the different things that we have posted, you will see lots and lots of inspiring stories of people who have really found wonderfully interesting ways to make the world better. And if you are curious about any of that, feel free to contact us. You can reach us at programs@siliconvalleyrotary.com. And we welcome any thoughts you have on other stories that we might need to be sharing with a service community as well. As we like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word before we push stop on the recording. Josh, what would you like to have in people's minds as they finish watching this video?
Well, after spending 20 years in a classroom, not knowing much about business, I think my favorite part of this whole journey has been the willingness of Rick and Pat Scannon, who are now both on our board, the passion and the stories that they've told me along the way that have been encouraging, because this startup stuff has been very difficult. It's very challenging. And when you have mentors and other people that have business background and acumen and are willing to spend time with you, they're transferring that knowledge to me. And it's just been incredible. One of my favorite stories was when we were at Denver at ISTE, and he took a GoPro and put it into my wife's bag of sandwiches. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "We've been there too, Josh. We used to take sandwiches there. Like we used to take sandwiches to conferences, or we used to sell these cameras out of the trunk." And, at that time, I didn't realize they had some of the same bumpy roads and some of the weird stuff that happens in a startup. But when you have mentorship, it just makes it not any easier, but it just makes it feel like I have a support system and some parachutes around me.
Excellent. With that, we'll finish today's recording and we'll see you next week.